Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we are privileged to have with us Andy Bailey, who is the founder of Petra Coach. Welcome to the program, Andy.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me today, bud.
Hey, you're welcome. I read through your book and probably read every single page of it. I might have skipped a couple of the paragraphs on a few of the case studies, but really excellent book. Really loved getting that. In fact, I shot a video of when I got your book because the shock and awe package that you delivered it in was just so spectacular. So I was just really pleased with that.
I appreciate that, and I saw that video because you put it on social media.
Oh, good. Yeah. Isn't that awesome? It's like people actually pay attention to stuff that we do out there, don't they?
I'll tell you what I did with that, and you're not the first one to do that. It doesn't make it any less special. I always share those back with our shipping and receiving team because they're the ones that put all that stuff together. And they never know what happens with it. They're like, why are we going through all this trouble to make these things so special? So now they know, and so I appreciate
Yeah, that's really we could probably stop right there, not talk about any of your coaching and consulting techniques and strategies. We could probably spend 4.5 hours on that one statement right there, which is so huge. And I would say that every single time that you get a client testimonial, a rave review, sharing it with the team is really huge as well. So that's really excellent. So here's a question: why in the world would you choose to have that delivery mechanism when people are happy enough just getting the book? I know that the answer is you want to make that memorable impression, but is that part of that reveal and part of that opening of a relationship?
Totally. And when I created the coaching organization and began to bring in team members, one of the first things we did, obviously, we practiced the Rockefeller habits, the basis of what we work with companies to implement the methodology of Earn, Harness, and the Rockefeller habits. One of the key components of that is to create core values for an organization or behavioral aspects, how people act. And we have a core value called everything and experience every time. So everything that we do, we work towards it being an experience. And for us, an experience is much like that box. We want people to remark about it. They go, wow, that's unique. Wow, I want to do that again. Wow, that was impactful. So we live up to our core values when we do that. And we have a tendency sometimes to overdo things, but I'd certainly rather overdo them than underdo them.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. And, on your website, one of the first things you see is the Petra Experience. And I know in my library, I've got a book called The Experience Economy. And that's a really big piece of, even some of the best marketing campaigns really are just focused on giving that client an experience from the moment they hear of your brand to the journey through the process of even learning and interacting. And then, let's go ahead and interact in a business relationship, and then there's phase 2 of the experience in reality, because let's see if you live up to that preamble, that prelude. So talk a little bit about experience from even what you said from that first impression of here comes this book, but how about when someone calls into the office, what happens and how are they greeted, or when, they request information, or when they, have that meeting, that preliminary meeting with the coach. What are some of those things that you guys focus on to amplify that experience?
I'll give you some really simple examples that are easy takeaway. I'm going to give you an example from the last hour. So I just wrapped up a meeting with a brokerage airlines company. So they broker flights, right? So you want to get in a plane and go somewhere. It's just you and a couple of your team members. They'll fly to wherever you want to go. They've got several airplanes, all the leaders. It's really a cool business. And I was using their whiteboard in their office. And I'm just writing with their markers, and I noticed that their markers are almost out of ink. But rather than say, do you have some more markers, I will go back to the office and have somebody order a pack of those markers and have them packaged up. Every time we send something to someone, whether it be a gift or anything else, it's always in a special package. We use brown paper and twine. So we'll brown paper and twine a box of markers and have it sent over to those guys with a handwritten note about, put these to good use or something of that nature. So we want to just put a little bit of a bow on everything. I've sent, last week I sent somebody door stops because I was in their office and needed to get a door to stay open because it was hot in their office, and they didn't have a door stop. They were using a bucket. So my point is the little details about people's lives that we can learn just through paying a little greater attention than the normal person might pay, and then fill in a little bit of a gap becomes part of an experience. Noticing things that other people wouldn't notice. When we set a room for a planning session, we have a very specific way that we want the room set up, 90-degree angles on paper, where the pen's going to go, what colors we use. It sounds a little bit overboard, but certainly when people walk into our rooms, they're like, wow, this is, these guys have it together. And then obviously the way that we teach and the words that we use and the methodology that we follow is just an experience.
You mentioned the word little things, and what I would say is they seem little, but they pack a powerful punch, because I would suspect that you've had people either say this or this is what you're going for with that marker analogy or example from even just today. That client, that potential client, if they're not your client right now, could be thinking, man alive, if they're that they notice those little things and that caring and that, serving on the front end before, we're even working together, I wonder how attentive they can be when they dive into our business and help us move to the next level. So I think that, some of those big things like, well, let's look at your P&Ls and let's look at your whatever. Markers? Are you serious? I would suspect that becomes the thing they talk about over and above some larger things that maybe even other consulting and coaching firms may get some accolades on.
Yeah, I mean, they're the basics of business, the business we're in and anybody else's business. There's the basics, and then there's the extra 15% that makes all the difference.
Yep, exactly.
Markers or additional articles that apply to that particular individual, or a book that we've recently read that we want somebody to read because they're going through this, or we work in their personal lives. There's somebody that's dealing with something, then we want to give them some more information on that on the side. It's that extra 15% we feel like makes all the difference.
And also, I would suspect that people realize that you're going slow enough in that moment in time, that session or that interaction, to pay attention. And you're not coming in with your own agenda. So whether it's a coaching or a consulting session, I would think that sometimes maybe these clients have worked with other people that go, I couldn't get 2 words out edgewise, and here comes this person coming in just telling me all these things, and they're off in left field. If they had just noticed and listened and paid attention, and I think that these things you're mentioning with the doorstop, with the marker, just goes to show that you're training yourself even individually as your coaches go in and work with the clients. Watch for those little things, listen for those little things, because they become big things, and it becomes a habit. It creates that momentum that if we're paying attention to markers, we're going to pay attention to something else they say regarding leadership or interpersonal within the business that we can work on.
To add to it, the constant with every business I've ever seen, and nobody's been able to show me one yet that didn't apply here. The one thing that we all have in common is people. And, business is difficult enough. The people most times make it more complex, and we all have to work together, and we have to get people in line to go in the same direction to achieve what we need to achieve. And that, I think, is the place that this listen more than you talk, pay attention to the little things. Where can you affect someone's life in a positive manner? Where can you have added value, not detracted value? Really can bring a business through any kind of challenges or and achieve goals that they've never thought they can achieve if they can just engage those people in that manner. And the small things, like we're using examples of doorstops and markers, but it could be a handwritten note, it could be a pat on the back, it could be a hug as they come in, it could be a lot of those things. But you've got to recognize it first before you can take that action.
Exactly. And I think that, guess what? We have become acclimated in this, social media instant gratification society that we're in, that if I need something, I know I can Facebook message this person. It's going to ping them. They're going to respond. Boom, I'm off doing my next thing. And I think that we get in that mentality of quick, go, run, that it becomes hard to slow down enough to stop and smell the roses, to pay attention, to listen. So I think that's a huge takeaway. Reading your book, I know that your coaching is founded on the Rockefeller habits. So of course we can speak for 4.5 days on that.
Right.
But give us a little bit of an overview of what that is, or what the Rockefeller habits are, and then how you start to introduce a company to integrating that into their business.
So Rockefeller habits are obviously John D. Rockefeller principles that Vern Harnish boiled down into a methodology. The best way to think about it is an operating system. Every business has an operating system. They don't know that they have one. A lot of times it's not codified. It's not practiced on a repeatable basis. So the habits, and I ran a telecommunication business for 18 years that I grew out of the dirt, sold it in 2011, and picked up the Rockefeller habits methodology about halfway through that time period, from 93 to 2011. So that's how I got introduced to it. I didn't know that there was an operating system I could implement. I just felt like I had to figure it out on my own. So it shortcuts an organization from where they are to where they want to be by putting this operating system in place. It's all the meeting rhythms. It's defining long-term goals and priorities. It's increasing, implementing KPIs and key performance indicators with individuals. It falls into 4 different categories known as strategy, people, execution, and cash, and then managing those 4 areas of every business in a very systematic approach. It's a lot. And if you grab Vern's book sometime, Rockefeller Habits, or his new one, Rockefeller Habits 2.0, titled Scaling Up, there's a lot of stuff in that book. What we've been able to do at Petra Coach is take that methodology and put it into an implementation platform. So we're able to go out and actually work with companies to implement what Vern had in that book and in that methodology.
And I think that if you can attribute something back to a well-known person like Rockefeller, if it was
right.
The Smith habits, people would go, who cares? So I think that gives a whole lot of credibility there. And then you start looking at time and time again with deliverables and good results. So now people start thinking, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. Well, when you start mentioning some of these things, and I know you just touched on the tip of the iceberg, but from core values to purpose to SWOT to brand promise and productivity drivers and all of these things, what size company is one that should start considering this? Because if you're a startup solopreneur, maybe it's not the right time, but at what point would be a good flag or a trigger to go, here's some things that we're noticing in our firm. Maybe we could look into doing this to kind of take us to the next level.
Well, I'll tell you, we do an annual survey with all the companies we work with every single year. We call it an impact report. We gather some data, and one of the questions we ask is, what would you tell somebody who's considering getting started in this methodology? And 9 out of the 10 answers are start sooner. Like there is no perfect size. We have worked with companies that are hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, close to billions. And I've worked with 2 guys at a kitchen table that were just getting their startup going. I will tell you, if you think about it this way, it's much easier to implement an operating system with 1 or 2 people than it is with 20 people or 200 people.
Because now you've got to relearn, teach the old dog new tricks and all the habits and all the things that's a good point.
Yeah. So you may not be able to afford a coach, when you've got a startup and it's just you and your partner, or you and your, first team member, or just you may not be able to afford a coach and spend the money for that. But you can do the habits. You can pick the books up and just get started with that on your own. It's much easier to define your core values when it's just you than when you got a team of people. It's much easier to go, all right, so where do I want to go in a year and 3 years? Yourself, than it is to take an executive team through that.
Yeah. When you think of coaching versus consulting, there is a difference. So I want you to touch on that just real briefly. But if you were to lay out the Rockefeller habits and your curriculum and your deliverables over the whole term of working with a client, it could look overwhelming. And I know that you would say, well, that's what we coach you through. Is there an element of of course, accountability, but is there an element of a hybrid between coaching and accountability, and we're going to help work with your team on these to make sure that they're implemented as well?
There is online training for this.
Okay.
In addition, in my book, which you references, the No Try Only Do book, there is an implementation there is an implementation plan in there. So somebody can grab that book and just start. It says, do these things the first quarter, do these things the second quarter, do these things the third quarter. One of the keys to this, and I made this mistake in my own organization, I went and saw Vern speak in 2004. I rushed back into my team and, all excited. Of course, they weren't there to see Vern, so they had no idea what the heck I was talking about. And I rushed to do all of these things, and it blew up. They're like, we're just too much. So the message that I'm telling you is, and to tell the listeners is go slow. Do a little bit this quarter, do a little bit the next quarter, do a little bit the next quarter. It will take 2 to 3 years to implement this operating system so that it sticks with an organization of any size, call it 20 people or more.
It's kind of like if you need to lose 10 pounds, it's not going to take you 10 minutes to lose it because it didn't take you 10 minutes to gain it. Or if you need to gain 10 pounds, the same thing. So anything worth doing is worth doing well. And what you're recommending is when you get into that mode of, kind of like Kanai, Tony Robbins teaches constant and never-ending improvement. Well, it's not immediate improvement because that could be a flash in the pan. So setting that expectation sounds like it's super important.
And there's a reason it's called habits. It's not, do it. It's a habit. And you have to do it repetitively over a long period of time before it becomes a habit.
So last question, let's wrap up with when you do start working with a company and you're starting them into this process, what are a couple things that you see are some common mistakes that they make that when you come back in and work with them, you start noticing, you know what, we deviated here a little bit. We need to make sure to make some course corrections.
I think that deviate is one of the big ones. Entrepreneurs, usually that's what we work with is entrepreneur, owner-led businesses, whether it be partners or teams or groups of people, but it's usually an entrepreneur either at the helm or multiple entrepreneurs inside of an organization. And they want to deviate. They want to tinker with the methodology. So when the big one that I hear all the time is, we do a daily huddle. We just do it on Wednesdays. And my answer is, that's not a daily huddle. I mean, the strict definition.
It's a weekly.
The huddle happens every day. Exactly.
Yeah.
They're like, but we don't need to do it every day. We feel like we can, again, you're tinkering with it. You're deviating from what 40,000 other companies have done in the past and had success from it. Why would you do that? Just let's do it daily. Let's do it the way it's prescribed. Let's get the habit in place. And then we'll look at making tweaks to it so it better fits what you guys, as opposed to trying to
maybe do your Wednesday, maybe do your daily, but then on Wednesdays, if that's your magic day, have an extra focus and go longer and focus on this element or this aspect. But I'm with you. You don't want, you want to trust the process, as they say, and success leaves clues. So if 40,000 other businesses have done it successfully, the struggle you have is in what you just mentioned is, you work with entrepreneurial, companies and entrepreneurial minds. Well, by definition, they're like, that's good. Now let's do it differently or be creative. So that's got to be a struggle, I'm certain.
And it just takes a strong coach to be able to, and all of our coaches, by the way, are all entrepreneurs in the past. Myself, built and sold an organization. All of our coaches have built and sold at least one, if not multiple organizations. Most of them practice the Rockefeller habits in those organizations. So they have a little bit of swagger to be able to go, look, Steve, I get that you want to do that, and I understand why you want to do it, but let me tell you what I found out when I did that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a little bit more muscle in the room to get people to do it. The other kind of big one that I see, Mike, is the leader, or sometimes it's leadership, will say, well, this is great for the team, but maybe not for me. Like they don't think they need to be included in the continual improvement process. They want their team to have it, but they don't want to do it themselves. And we just won't work with teams like that. Just like, you guys are going to be mediocre for the rest of your lives. We can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, do as I say, but not as I do. That just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, that's not even leadership.
It's really not. And I'm sure that you can turn it the other way and say, why don't you do everything over and above? I mean, not only just how we say it, but do it even more perfectly than how we prescribe it so that you're leading by example. So that's just spectacular. So I would like to just ask at this point, if someone is interested in learning a little bit more about the Rockefeller habits, how it may fit into their organization, what's the best way that they can reach out and connect with you and your team and engage and interact a little bit more?
Yeah, just go to the website, Petra Coach, Petra Coach.com. There's also an entire section on there called Action Docs. You can download a lot of the templates and do a lot of the work yourself. There's tons of videos on there, so it is pretty interactive. And there's a contact form in there if you want to get in touch with us.
Excellent. Well, Andy, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Really enjoyed learning more about your business and wish you all the great success moving forward.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.